Daniel Ellsberg, author of the Pentagon Papers, said, "Without seeing young men going to prison for nonviolent acts against the draft, men I met on their way to prison, no Pentagon Papers." Because of the Pentagon Papers, the Watergate Robbery, and the insane acts of the plumbers, people saw what was really under the mask of President Nixon. A primary cause of this was the Watergate Robbery. On June 17, 1972, 5 robbers, including Security Advisor of Nixon's re-electing committee, James McCord, stole from the Democratic National Committee offices. The robbers were wearing wiretaps and had cameras for photographing documents. John Dean, former White House legal counsel, said during court hearings that President Nixon approved the robbery. This showed Americans that he would do anything, even illegal, to protect press leaks. Nixon had tapings of conversations held in the Oval Office. During the court hearings following the Watergate robbery, the judge ordered that Nixon would surrender the tapes. He tried to redirect the investigation, however, he was unsuccessful and was still ordered to give up the tapes. The tapes revealed many conversations with others that were offensive and demeaning. When these were revealed, Americans did not trust him and his career was wrecked. Nixon also was not being trusted by people because of Daniel Ellsberg. Daniel Ellsberg is a former military analyst and author of the Pentagon Papers. Daniel Ellsberg worked for Rand Corporation as an analyst from 1959 to 1964. He also spent 2 years in Vietnam, and when he returned, he thought that the Vietnam War was bad and misguided. After Ellsberg's time in Vietnam, he contributed a lot into writing the Pentagon Papers. The Pentagon Papers was a report on the United States defense's involvement in the Vietnam War. This top-secret report held segments of documents that showed the United States' involvement was much bigger than what was publicly revealed. April 1971. Daniel Ellsberg gives a full copy of the Pentagon Papers to Neil Sheehan, a journalist who works for the New York Times. Later that year, on June 13th, the New York Times publishes a front-page story with excerpts of the Pentagon Papers. Once the government learned about the top-secret papers being leaked to the New York Times, the Department of Justice filed a short-term restraining order against them, which was put into effect. The executive branch said that there would need to be a court order. The New York Times replied that this would be violating the First Amendment, which states freedom of press and speech American citizens have. The court went in favor of the newspaper, which allowed them to keep publishing the articles related to the Pentagon Papers. Meanwhile, the anti-war movement keeps growing and gains more people. This happens because Nixon continues to increase defenses on Vietnam to extreme measures. To understand more of why Americans were upset about the secrets kept from them in the Vietnam War, we have to learn more about the decisions that previous presidents made in the war. When John F. Kennedy got a report on the Vietnam War, he found that Viet Cong would be able to possibly defeat them within 3 months. John F. Kennedy came up with the idea of CIP, which would expand the U.S. economic and military aid to South Vietnam, in which the U.S. gave South Vietnam $42 million to expand their army. This shows that American presidents were making many decisions that basically made no sense. Why put more money into the war if there's a huge possibility that Viet Cong would defeat them within 3 months? That is why people were so upset, and the anti-war movement started to grow even more. The plumbers also ruined Nixon's reputation. The plumbers were a group of people whose jobs were to protect information and keep press leaks from happening. These are also the group of people who committed the Watergate robbery. Because Daniel Ellsberg was the person who leaked the Pentagon Papers to the newspapers, it was the plumbers' #1 target. They invaded Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office to find information they could use against him. This information was revealed during Ellsberg's trials. Because of the criminal acts Plumbers committed against Ellsberg, all charges he would have received were revoked. This string of events gave Nixon the knowledge that he was going to be impeached in the end, no matter what. Before any of this process could happen, he resigned August 8, 1974. People learn from their successes and failures. History is all the triumphs and tragedies the world has had over time. This string of events is a great example of America's successes and failures. It was a tragedy because of all the lives taken while fighting in a war we knew we weren't going to win. But it was a triumph as well because it shed light on the anti-war movement and freedom of press. It also made an impact on how Americans elected leaders.